Dear listeners, a very good evening, assalamu alaikum, and welcome back to Friday Night Fusion, the new sound of Great Britain, broadcasting live and interactive on 93.5 FM, Unity FM across Birmingham and surrounding areas, both nationally and internationally on www.unityfm.net and all of our partner radio stations and websites across the UK and around the world. Now, time and time again, we are always looking back in history to find inspirational role models, men and women that the young people of today can look up to. History that perhaps isn't talked about that often, but history that within it has a very inspirational story. And today we'd like to talk about somebody who has actually played a huge role in shaping history, a lady by the name of Inayat Khan. She was a significant part in the Second World War. She fought alongside the British Army, helping to defeat the Nazis at the time. She was one of a kind, in a sense. She was one of the few women that were actually given some of the many ranks that she was able to hold. And a lady by the name of Shrabani Bassu has recently written a book regarding Inayat Khan, her life, what she stood for, and what she was able to do at what was most certainly a very turbulent time, not only for the UK but also for a lot of Europe and the world. Shrabani Bassu, welcome to Friday Night Fusion. Thank you very much for giving up your valuable time to be with us today.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for calling me.
First and foremost, Inayat Khan, we read many stories about her, but in your opinion, after studying her story from the point of view of a journalist and an author as you are, what do you think Inayat Khan stands for?
She stands to me, she stands for an extraordinarily brave Indian woman who went out of her way to volunteer for the war effort in the fight against fascism because she believed in fighting fascism. These were the principles that she believed in that made her do this. It was not any motive for revenge. It was nothing else. She was actually a shy, a gentle writer of children's stories. She was a musician. So for somebody to come out from this background and a fairly traditional upbringing in a Muslim family, she was a Sufi, for her to come out of this family and then say that she was going to go and volunteer for the war effort was remarkable. And then subsequently what she did in the field, of course, was outstanding. And the fact that when she was caught, she was tortured and interrogated, and she did not crack. Till the end, her interrogators, the captors, did not even know her real name. That's how good she was. So it's an extraordinary story of bravery and very, very inspiring.
She did originate from a very wealthy family, a very privileged background. She was indeed a descendant of the royals there in India, and she certainly had some very famous people associated with her family. Mm-hmm. So she didn't really need to go and put herself up on the front line, did she? What do you think was her motivation, bearing in mind her character, which was one of a quiet nature, one of a very sensitive nature, some writers have suggested? What was it? What was the determination in her that made her want to go and put herself up on the front line?
Exactly. It was, she's a descendant of Tipu Sultan, who was known as the Tiger of Mysore. He was the 18th century ruler of southern India. He actually died fighting the British. So it's an extraordinary process of history that his descendant, Inayat Khan, dies fighting for the British.
Yes.
But there were many contradictions in her position because she herself came from a strongly nationalist family, and she believed in Indian independence, and she made no bones about this. She was completely frank about it. She had an interview with her at her RAF office, and the officers asked her if she would support any of the Indian leaders who were actually opposed to British rule.
Yes.
And she was completely frank. She said, at this moment, when the war against fascism is on, it is important to back Britain. And she told them frankly that once the war was over, she would go back to supporting Indian independence, because
Yes.
that was her passion as well. So she came from so many contradictions that made her still come out in support of this cause, because she was also a Sufi. She believed in non-violence, yet she was someone who went in there in the front line. She didn't opt for nursing or some work in the background. She wanted to be out there. She wanted to do something for the war. And she also had this conversation with her friend. One of the motives might have been to build bridges between India and Britain. She told her friend that if some people from India made great sacrifices in the war and were highly recognized, it might build bridges between India and Britain,
Yes.
leading eventually to
Yes.
granting of independence. So
Sure.
she had many thoughts in her mind at this, she was just a young woman, beautiful young woman, but she was so focused that she told the War Office exactly what she wanted to do, that she would back Britain when the war was on and then back Indian independence.
And what was very interesting about her story was the fact that for many years she was a wireless operator during the war, and even when all of the other women, all of the other people in her position had been captured by the Nazis and were no doubt being tortured, being interrogated, and she was given the choice, wasn't she, of returning back to Britain, returning back to England, which was a choice she actually declined because she believed in supporting this effort for democracy, for freedom against the fascists so much.
Yes, absolutely. She was told within a week of her landing in Paris, her circuit was blown. That's the operative word. So they were all exposed. They were captured. The chief was captured. The other wireless operators were captured. And she was actually all alone in Paris. She went underground, and she was told that she should come back because it was very, very dangerous.
Yes.
But Noor stayed on. She realized that she was the last link between Paris and London, and she said she would stay on and rebuild the circuit, which is what she did. She actually single-handed did the work of 6 radio operators. She was, whereas life expectancy for a radio operator was just 6 weeks, Noor Inayat Khan survived for 3 months. She just outdid the Gestapo. They were out there to catch her. They had a description of her. Some of her colleagues had just sort of coughed up under interrogation.
Yes, yeah, most
They had
certainly.
said, they had named Madeleine, and suddenly the Germans knew that they were no longer looking for a man. They were actually looking for a woman.
Sure.
So she was exposed in that sense. And the fact that she had to carry this radio set around with her means she was doubly exposed. She had to carry it on the metro. She carried it on a cycle. She could be questioned at any time, which is
Most
what
certainly.
happened. She made several narrow escapes by just talking her way out of situations or outrunning the Gestapo, literally. So she was in a situation where she was extraordinary bravery and keeping her wits about her.
Sure.
So
Of course, you're somebody who's actually studied the story, the life, the work, the achievements, the heroism of Noor Inayat Khan quite closely. But just for the purposes of our listeners who perhaps have never heard of Noor Inayat Khan before, or don't really know who she is or where she comes from, what would you say makes her so special and so unique? What were her greatest achievements?
I think the fact, her background is important. The fact that her father was Hazrat Inayat Khan, a well-known Sufi preacher and musician, that she was brought up, she was born in Moscow, she was brought up, her mother was American, Ora Ray Baker. She was, so she had mixed heritage. But her Indian tradition was very strong in her family. She herself wore the sari quite often. She played the veena, the Indian instrument. She learned to write in Urdu. She would write in the Roman script, but she wanted to learn Urdu. She wanted to learn Sanskrit. She wanted to learn Hindustani. So this tradition was very important. And for somebody from this background then to go out there and join the war effort and do what she did without flinching, with complete courage and determination, was extraordinary. And that too in the 1940s. This was a woman in the field. It was of her 4 siblings, she was the one who was out there. 2 brothers, 1 sister, and Noor. She was the eldest, and she volunteered, which is what makes her extraordinary. And her courage in the face of torture, her courage in the face of captivity, the fact that she did not reveal any secrets, the fact that she moved everybody, even her German captors. later, when they had the war crimes tribunals, one of them actually started crying, thinking when he was told what had happened to Noor. She even managed to move her captors. So there was something quite extraordinary about her.
Nowadays, we see a lot of right-wing fascist sentiments that sometimes still exist in certain corners. In fact, recently in Europe, it has been observed that some of these right-wing sentiments amongst a small minority have come to the fray. This argument that what role do the Asian community, the Muslim community, Hindus and Sikhs and perhaps non-whites have in the UK? What contribution do you think people like Noor Inayat Khan have played in actually showing that this is the country of the Asian community as much as it is the country of the whites, the blacks and all other communities that reside here today?
I think it's absolutely crucial. Noor represents not only the men and women of the SOE who died, but she represents the 2.5 million Indian soldiers who volunteered for the war effort. This was the biggest volunteer army. They died in far-off fields in Africa and in Europe, far away from home, for a war that wasn't perhaps even their own. So it's very important. It's vital to remember all their contribution and know that, without the contribution from the Asians, from the Indians, the Pakistanis, the Gurkhas from Nepal, this would not have happened. The war against fascism may not have been won. And I think it's very, very important to recognize this and to give them their due respect. And Noor is just one of them. She is a woman. She stands out because her individual story is so fantastic. But she is one of those who volunteered for the war effort. She's one of the 2.5 million that she represents. And I think it's very, very vital that we remember this. As you say, in the troubled times we live in, where fascism is constantly rearing its head, where right-wing forces are at work, it is important to remember that there was a young Muslim woman who had her whole life before her, but she went there and died for freedom and for this country. It's important and vital to remember this and so that everybody can pay their respects to Noor, and she is an icon. So this memorial in Gordon Square will keep her story alive, I think, for future generations. People are coming there. From the very next day, I've been seeing streams of people coming there, laying their wreaths, paying tributes to her, and I think it's wonderful.
And of course, it didn't just take till 2012, 2011 to recognize Noor and her contribution, even in as early as 1946 and afterwards and before that, to a certain extent, you saw many people coming forward and commending her achievement, commending her heroism. Even in the 1950s, I believe there were people who came out and said that even till the last minute, Noor Inayat Khan was somebody who didn't give a single state secret herself to the Nazis and fascists, and she's also been one of the few lucky recipients of the George Cross.
She is actually only one of 3 of the women of the SOE who were awarded the George Cross. So she occupies a very special position in that respect. There were so many Indians who won the Victoria Cross as well, but she was posthumously awarded the George Cross. It is with her family in Paris. But the thing is, her story was forgotten. Over the years, it's been over 60 years after the war, Noor's story was forgotten. Whereas her other colleagues had memorials and blue plaques and busts and museums dedicated to them, there was nothing in London for Noor Inayat Khan. This was the city where she was recruited. This was the city where she was trained. And I felt very strongly that, London had to catch up with Paris. There are several memorials to her in Paris. And why was it that the British had forgotten her? So this campaign was a long-drawn campaign. And finally, we had the memorial for Noor Inayat Khan in Gordon Square, the first to any Asian woman, which is hugely significant.
Well, absolutely. And you're actually heading up the foundation there. Of course, over 60 years have passed since the sacrifice of Noor Inayat Khan for democracy, for freedom, and for our country that we all are a part of and that we all love. What do you think the women of today, particularly young Muslim women, young Asian women who perhaps lack in confidence or are looking for some sort of inspiration, what do you think Noor Inayat Khan can provide for them, or her story can provide for them in their lives today in the modern 21st century?
I give a lot of talks in schools and universities, and I've always found, I've been to some schools in Manchester which have large Asian ethnic populations, girls' schools, and I've always found that these students have been so moved by her story that they come out there and say that they're going to carry on. They're going to go to university, they're going to achieve something. They feel very inspired. And I find that fascinating. If you can inspire even one person to go to university, to achieve something, I think, Noor has achieved miracles. So it's, as an icon, I think she is something that people can really, young Asian women can really look up to and feel very proud of. And recognition for her is recognition for the Asian community as well. So it's very, very important.
Now, a lot of people may look to you and see the work that you have done in highlighting Noor's story. How can people support your foundation, and what sort of work are you up to nowadays to be of benefit to the society as it stands today in 2012?
Well, we've set up this trust. Basically, it's something to build bridges. It's to promote religious harmony by highlighting the work of the contribution of Asians to this country. So that is the focus. We will be celebrating 2014, which is Noor's centenary. We will also be doing things to mark the 100 years of the start of the First World War, where many Indian soldiers volunteered. So we will do many things to take note of, to observe various centenaries or birthdays or important dates, and raise the awareness of the contribution of Asians to this society. I think that's very important in the sort of work that Noor was doing, which was building bridges. We want to carry that on, which is why the trust is named after her, and it aims to carry on doing the things that she gave up her life for. So people can contribute to the trust. We are open. We have our website, www.noormemorial.org. Read about us. We are a registered charity. Contribute to it, and we can carry on the good work. We want to make education packs for schools. We've already received several requests for that. I go touring and talk about Noor, talk about Indian soldiers in various schools, universities. So that is part of our curriculum. We're a very, very small charity, but we are very focused, and we achieved this in 2 years' time. So we plan to really do something to promote racial and religious harmony.
Absolutely fantastic. Well, I'm sure all of our listeners will be in agreement on the fact that you are doing great work. And of course, the struggle for the promotion of women, particularly Asian women in particular, still continues. We recently saw the tragic shooting of Malala Yousafzai in Pakistan that took place because she felt so strongly about the promotion of education. And she is somebody who's very much alike to Noor Inayat Khan, isn't she, in many ways?
Exactly. I was thinking about her the whole time and saying, these are the women, these strong women who need to be recognized, their work. I mean, Malala is an icon to youngsters, young Asian women, and this is the sort of work that we want to do, to recognize these women and do what they stood for, do what, they bravely stood for. And in Noor's case, gave her life, and in Malala's case, risked her life for it. So, yes, it's very much part of the same. These are the women who inspire us, and this is what we will push. And it's not just the women, we will talk about men as well.
Absolutely fantastic. I think all of our male listeners are very glad to hear about that as well. Shrabani Bassu from the Noor Inayat Khan Foundation, thank you very much for joining us today and sharing what definitely is a truly inspirational story that all of us can look up to, that of Noor Inayat Khan.
Thank you.